wellness world. It's Lisa Starr with StarCast. We're back with another episode of StarCast where we speak with wellness warriors. So today we're fortunate to have a guest that I have been trying to land for 2 years, it turns out. He's been very busy, and you'll understand why when you hear the story. Some of you may have heard of the biostation. I know that when I heard that word, I thought, that's a really great name. I need to know what that is. Because who doesn't want to go to a biostation and get your health checked, right? So we have the co-founder and CEO, Ross Bloom, with us today. Welcome, Ross.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I appreciate the patience.
Yes, I have been very patient. Thank you for noting that. But, you know, when you have to get someone who's busy nailed down to 45 minutes to their chair, it's not easy. So, Ross, you and I met in spring of 2021. You were just opening a biostation at the Carillon, and I was visiting the Carillon in Miami, and I was intrigued by it, and we chatted, and I thought, this is such a great story. So I'm going to ask you to go back for listeners and tell us a little bit about you, Ross Bloom, and your journey from college and how you came up with this idea.
Okay. I guess how it all started. So I was actually born into a family of healthcare providers. My father was a practicing cardiologist. I grew up in Boca Raton. That's where he opened his practice. And probably the late 70s is when he opened up a practice. My mother happens to be a nurse practitioner. Actually, my sister is also a nurse. So healthcare is definitely something I've known and been around most of my life. At an early age, I quickly realized that was not something that I wanted to become as a healthcare provider, primarily because my dad's beeper would go off at all hours of the day, and ultimately his priority was his patients, and which sometimes would interrupt the flow of my day. And then I would be dragged into various emergency room situations. And what I really witnessed was my father in the most heroic position, but ultimately around sick people, right? There was a need for that. And, you know, he was very committed to his patients and his practice. But it didn't necessarily resonate with me in terms of what I wanted to be. But everyone always asked, do you want to be a doctor? Just like your dad.
Of course.
And the answer was no, I don't. I don't like to, unfortunately, be around people that are suffering. It just didn't really appeal to me. So with that said, I graduated high school in Boca Raton, and then I went to the University of Colorado, where I was trying to figure out really what is the next step for me and what would my professional career look like. And everyone in my family just assumed I was going to be a lawyer because my sister Randy was a lawyer, and she was a very influential part of my development in my younger years. So I was going to follow in her footsteps. But again, that didn't necessarily resonate with me, and I was always very entrepreneurial. I tried to drop out of school multiple times to start various businesses. My father is like, what are you talking about? Get back to school. We're not doing that. You're not doing that. Ultimately, when I finished college and I came back down to Florida, it was in 2005. And I always say to people, when I was in college, I didn't know anything outside of the university, really. It was always about, you know, what was going on in Boulder, Colorado. And when I came back to Florida, the real estate market was just exploding. Everybody I knew was either a real estate investor, a flipper, or they were in the mortgage industry. And so I decided before I was going to either go back to school, I'd say I wanted to take a break. And a buddy of mine said, "Why don't you come work for my family company? We sell mortgages." I was like, I don't know what really that is, or how that ultimately
do it, but okay.
Right. So I started working with him, and basically it was a strictly sort of a straight commission-based position, which I was okay taking because at night I was waiting tables. During the day I would work, and I started to learn the business, and was very just naturally attracted to it and became very successful. I also decided to leave the business because I didn't feel like it was sustainable. This was right before the big collapse. I just said, you know what? I'm making too much money at such a young age, and there's no way that the value of everyone's home will just continue to appreciate.
Well, good for you for noticing that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd been smarter, I would have sort of bet on
Mm-hmm.
the big fall and big crash, but I didn't really understand the world at that point in time. So ultimately, took a break. Sort of, I think we all can recall the
Mm-hmm.
financial crisis,
Yes.
and the same family that I worked for initially called me and said, "Listen, we've changed everything completely. We're going to be a national lender. We want you to come back in and the business has changed dramatically." And so I was able to. There's probably 12 of us at the time, maybe about 12 of us, and then I was able to work very closely with this organization, with this group, and we grew to probably roughly 200 employees. We were one of the largest, I'd say, FDIC insured residential lending arm. And I always tell people that was really my postgraduate experience.
Mm-hmm. Sure. It's better than grad school, really.
Yeah, exactly. So loved the business, loved really putting together architecting deals and ultimately helping people, right? What I didn't really like about the business is I would engage in a relationship with someone for a substantial period of time, request documents over and over and over again. And ultimately, once the transaction ended, I never really spoke to that person again.
Mm-hmm.
So all during this period of time, I became very close with my now business partner, who was really assisting patients in the age management medicine world, right? And for me, it was something I was very attracted to for two reasons. Outside of my professional career, I was always very passionate about exercise, nutrition, how to always just improve performance, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I was more of an athlete, and I was looking for improvement of output, and I always realized I have to improve my input.
Very good.
And so my partner, he and I became really good friends, and our relationship really was established around basketball. He was a really good basketball player. I pretend to be one. And basically, we every morning there was a group of us, and probably 20 of us that had been together for a long period of time that would play basketball. And because it was this basketball run was at a club called Lifetime Fitness. Uh,
Sure.
and so he was able to acquire a lot of patients that he helped service through the doctors that he was help servicing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I could see the impact that this type of medicine had on the patients. Or they were really his clients, but the patients, the doctors that he was connected with. And I thought, man, that's impactful. Like you could
Mm-hmm.
watch what the transformation that took place. So I started picking his brain a little bit and started to understand the business, where it was really more of a relationship business where you would onboard patients and help manage their care for an ongoing period of time. And for me, that just resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be more intimate in a business around people. Um, and so started picking his brain, like I said, started learning a little bit about what he was doing, all in the same thought process. I used to go to Vitamin Shop, and that's where I would
Mm-hmm.
get all my supplements, right? And just so I could, again, perform better, recover better, and just have a better outcome.
Be a better basketball player.
Right. And ultimately, I always thought, it'd be really interesting if I were to come into this store full of all these supplements and a doctor would usher me around and he would develop a plan specific to me based upon not what I think I need, but what I genetically now understand I need.
Right.
Right.
Because you, the person, you don't know, like you know how you feel, but we're not trained to know what ingredients are missing for us, right?
Absolutely. So I just felt like that would be pretty unique, and they would be based on a diagnostic study. So we would run a full panel of blood, and from there they would tell me you're deficient here, or you're good here, or there's nothing we can do about this issue, whatnot, right? Um, and so between Keith Follis, that's my business partner, between my relationship with him and sort of where I was in my life, and I was in my early 30s, and again, it was just things were changing, right? Um, and I also really respected the health movement that was underway, right? The birth of, we'll call it lifestyle brands and the birth of Whole Foods, and the organic movement was underway. And I felt like the medical community had not really connected or caught up with that movement. And I thought there's an opportunity, because if we could blend what I was envisioning to experience at, we'll call it a vitamin or supplement shop, with the impact that what Keith was able to, I guess, support with his patients, then or the patients of the doctor that he was helping support their relationship, then ultimately we can combine these two thought process. We can be forward facing to the community. And really, if we could just become a resource for people where they can learn about their current state of health and well-being, and then support their journey throughout their life and provide really lifestyle medicine programming, then I think we could be onto something here. And so Keith was like, that sounds like a good idea. I've never seen it really done. And he was been around, we'll call it the age management medicine sector for probably 20 years at that point in time. So really early on. So he said, listen, if this is something you really want to do, we're going to need a doctor. So I said, all right, well, let me call my father, because he's a doctor, and let me pick his up the concept. And my dad took a meeting 5:30 p.m. on a traditional, weekday, which he would tell you was never a good sign if I called him up and said, we need to meet. And ultimately, the three of us sat down and started, explaining to my father what it is that we wanted to do. And Dr. Bloom, who's not a risk taker, he mitigates every chance. That's just sort of
Sure. You don't want a cardiologist who's a risk taker, right?
Exactly. So, and in my father's practice, like I said, he was very dedicated to the practice and to his patients. The home that I grew up in was probably 600 yards away from his office, which was across the hospital. So I always joke that my dad literally just drove in a circle for most of his life, but he felt that he needed to be close to his practice and close to the hospital for his patients. So I never imagined my father ever changing anything. And this is close to 40 years of the same routine over and over and over. And so after our initial meeting, my father sent me a link to a fellowship called the American Academy of Anti-Aging. And it's come to realize that it's one of the largest international fellowships for medical professionals to get board certified in what I call age management medicine. So he sent me a link, and 7 days from our initial meeting, he was already signed up taking modules. So he was going to get board certified.
Good for him.
Yeah. And I was basically, I went with him to the convention, and I was just part of the exhibit hall just to get exposed to this whole world, which, by the way, was much deeper and broader than I ever could have imagined.
Of course.
It was extremely impressive. It was very organized in terms of the actual convention. And I walked the exhibit hall, which was probably like 40,000 square feet, massive. And I learned about every lab that was out there. I learned about all the compounding pharmacies, learned about, I was just downloading more information, being totally embraced in this community. And what Keith and I ended up started to do is basically we started doing like Wellness Wednesdays at my dad's cardiology practice.
Good idea.
Yeah, as he furthered his education and became more comfortable with protocols that he thought was really important. By the way, he was a big time believer of if he can get in front of somebody before they called his office, and that patient was willing to do whatever it took to change their current lifestyle, improve their health and well-being, that was something he was always trying to accomplish.
Well, you don't want to meet them in the ER, so that's a good approach.
Correct. So ultimately, during this initial launch period, right, where my father again was becoming more comfortable with this type of medicine, when we started doing Wellness Wednesdays at his cardiology practice. And I'll also tell you that my father's practice after 40 years it was failing. And reason being is, he was spending more time behind a computer. The birth of the EMR changed medicine in a lot of ways.
So many bad ways.
Right. And, Medicare, ultimately, their reimbursements were being cut every day, right? And my father is not a 7-minute visit type of physician or type of, he cares about his patients, and he wants to know about their families, and he wants to know, he builds a relationship with his patients, which is why he really will tell you he got into medicine, was to be a provider, to be a care provider, but also to build a really strong patient doctor relationship. And so so between his, I guess, approach to medicine and the way medicine was evolving, his practice was failing. And he really didn't know which direction to head.
That's so unfair after 40 years of dedicating yourself to something.
Yeah, it was tragic, right? And so at the age of 67, ultimately, I came in to have a conversation with him, never thinking that he would really change anything. He's a creature of habit. And nor was I asking him to change anything. I was just wanting his opinion about the type of medicine that the doctors that Keith was helping in terms of the service side. What did he think about it? And he said he very much believed that if people would optimize their biological systems, we would be able to not avoid end-stage disease, but we can prevent it as long as possible.
Or delay it or mitigate the effects of it, right?
Exactly. So I actually read something recently that I thought it was a really great quote, which sort of really resonates with our practice, right? It's, we want to put more life in your years, not more years in your life.
I like that.
And, I didn't write that, but I read it and I thought that's exactly what our mission is, right? And that's what we're here to do. And so Dr. Bloom jumped at opportunities. We started doing Wellness Wednesdays at his practice. The community started to respond in a positive way. And I said, Dad, what do you want to do here? We're booked. And I said, I need another day. And he said, I can't juggle, these two practices. And he's like, Ross, I'm 67 years old here, right? Like, I need to make a decision. And I said, well, listen, this decision is completely yours to make. I'm here to support whatever you want to do. And so after almost 40 years, my father wrote a very historic letter to his patients, just saying, it's been an absolute honor, but my time in cardiology has come to an end. And literally just gifted his practice to a colleague that he knew would take great care of his patients. And that was a big moment for him, and it was a big moment for us. And at that point in time, the pressure was on. I was in a position in my life.
Now you've got your dad on the payroll.
Yeah. And what was really, I would say, that with the three of us really took his lead with two core values, right? And you would always say this. He'd say, in the beginning, he said, listen, guys, here's the deal. I've always been an insurance-based practice, right? That's just what doctors do. He's like, we're now crossing over into private pay. And he says, now this medicine is becoming more of a business. And here's the deal. In my world, there's medicine over money and there's patient over profit. And if those two core values ever get blended, I'm out, because I'm here to only provide care for patients. And I just want you guys to know that's sort of the philosophic compass of our medical practice.
I love that. Medicine over money, patient over profit.
Yeah. And he said that's the deal. And we just sort of took that as sort of the foundational aspect of our business and our medical practice. And we just started marching forward. So the beginning part of our story really starts in the middle of 2013. And that's when, we started brainstorming on a brand, and, that was all new to me. I wasn't created a brand before, but I actually had a real clear vision of the experience I wanted our patients to go through.
Well, that's essential to help create the brand, for sure.
Absolutely. And so, for us, it was education, experience, outcome, right? And that's something that our new chief strategy officer keeps driving home in terms of the practice, right? That if we provide if we are viewed as a resource and we provide education and we create this extraordinary customer service experience. And I've actually elevated this process now to a level of hospitality. We're not really in the service business anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the hospitality business, which is a totally different thought process when you're now treating guests.
And it's a totally different experience than most medical experiences are.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And we definitely didn't want, the clipboard, the foggy window that you walk up to. That was not what we wanted. We wanted to create something that was unique and very experiential. And then we know that if patients stay compliant to treatment plans, they're going to achieve their outcome, which typically is just alleviating aging related issues that we all deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether lack of cognitive function, whether it's the inability to lose stubborn body fat, whether it's low libido, whether it's menopause related issues. And so we were able to create that, right? And ultimately, I built our first location in our East LA location. We opened it in May of 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Keith really was developing sort of what we call the patient advocate role. So essentially view that as your concierge, your direct point of contact with the practice. Every patient is assigned a patient advocate. Their job is to listen first, then ultimately help direct that patient through their own journey within the biostation ecosystem, if you will. And
what services did the first biostation offer?
Great question. So we started out with really at this point in time, we have 3 pillars of care. So Defy Age is the most clinical aspect of the practice. That's where we do a deep dive diagnostically. We spend about 45 minutes up to an hour and a half with the patient, and our medical professionals review all the labs and develop a treatment plan with the patient to achieve the patient's outcome. And ultimately, the hope is, okay, you're genetically disposed to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and we can identify all those biomarkers, and then we can adjust, and then we can provide supplementation, and we can provide medication, and we can provide education for the patient to understand where they are.
Where they are and how they can stay there and not go down the wrong road.
Correct. So that's Defy Age. That was really how we launched the practice. I'd say in the same breath, we also started a service line or a pillar of care called Replenish Life. Those services include IV nutrition, nutrient injections, and supplementation. So we started using pharmaceutical grade supplements. And really that was sort of that was what services those were the treatment offerings initially when we launched the biostation. Dr. Bloom and I continued to go through, we traveled we went on tour because it took him about 18 months to get board certified from the A4M. And we went from California all the way to Florida and a lot of states in between, going to different symposiums and really just immersing ourselves in learning all of the things that we can do to help support, educate our patients, provide great service to our patients, and drive outcomes. And so his practice of what he was doing continued to evolve as his education continued to evolve. And I would tell you that this sector of healthcare has also grown substantially since 2013. I mean, it's become more widely accepted by the medical community. Bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is definitely something people are less fearful of, because we've actually now have a longer term and longer period of time of driving clinical outcomes and patients achieving the results they're looking for in a very safe way. So that's really how it started. And then we continue to evolve the practice and the offerings. I will tell you that when we started doing pellet replacement, using pellets as a way to replace hormones, our practice transformed.
And really? Why is that? And tell us about the pellets.
The pellets that we use they're about the size of a Tic Tac. And they're comprised of what we use is estradiol and testosterone replacements. So we help support and replace testosterone for both men and women,
Mm-hmm.
and estrogen for women,
Mm-hmm.
as well as testosterone. So we were a little cautious. Dr. Bloom was a little cautious to use them when we first opened the practice, just because he felt like once the pellet was inserted into the patient, there was no turning back, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that if we could use creams or other modalities to replace hormones
Mm-hmm.
through only bioidentical hormone replacement, then ultimately he can control that better.
And how is the pellet used?
So the pellet is actually inserted into the subcutaneous tissue, typically in the around the glute area.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a 15-minute procedure, super simple, easy in and out.
So not a pill that you ingest orally, and it
Nope.
goes more quickly into the bloodstream, is my guess.
Exactly. So within about, we'll call it a 2-week period of time, a reservoir of blood actually builds around the pellets, and your body just starts to pull from it as it needs. So it's probably, it mirrors that of the most natural biological process.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we've had great success with it.
Hmm.
But it's been the most impactful when we're treating females. And so when we started using pellets as a way as a way to clinically achieve outcomes, our patient demographic was probably this is around 2015. We were probably about 70% male to female.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly went to 50% male to female.
Interesting. So if you started off male, do you think that's because you're male and Keith is, and you were interested in that aspect, or why was that?
Yeah, that's Keith primarily was just always helping the doctors on the service side with male patients.
Mm-hmm.
Testosterone replacement therapy was just what he was solely
Mm-hmm.
focused on at that time. And so we thought we were going to be primarily a male focused facility. Not the case. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, when a woman goes through menopause, from the patient feedback we've received and from I've received firsthand, it's ultimately can be a pretty catastrophic event, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like immediately things change. You lose
Yes.
complete control of your HVAC system, right? And ultimately, you dramatically there's a dramatic moment in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've learned that by using bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, we can minimize the effects and almost reverse menopause entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when all of a sudden the transition of our patient demographic shifted, they also started asking for cosmetic services.
Mm.
Around 2016, birthed the third pillar of care, which is called Restore Beauty. So those three pillars really help support the practice of the biostation. And Restore Beauty as a service line or a pillar of care comprises mostly of injectables, lasers, body contouring. So it's really your true med spa offerings.
Right.
And it really helped round out the practice. And so our patients who were looking to feel better also were looking to look better. And
Mm-hmm.
the look better also wanted to feel better. So it just seemed like a really good match for us. And at this point in time, we decided those are our three service lines.
Mm-hmm.
Those are how we're going to provide the great education, great experience, great outcome. And instead of growing broad and trying to do everything, because there's a lot of things that can be offered to patients, we decided to grow tall and really narrowly focus on the services that we wanted to really perfect.
Well, I love that. I love the three pillars that you've chosen and the way they sort of came out organically from what you were trying to do, rather than you coming in with sort of, this is our plan. You watched what people wanted and you grew in that direction.
Yeah, so I would say our practice is very organic, right? From the moment we opened the door, there was no playbook. We sort of
Well, there was no one to follow. No one was doing it.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, we were early. And what I quickly learned is that the market also was sort of confused. Why would I want to do,
Mm-hmm.
why would I put an IV, why would I go to your facility, start an IV full of vitamins? Why would I need that? Right. And I would have to educate the community. It's like, well, we go directly to the bloodstream. You avoid your GI tract. We can get much higher doses of micronutrients that, by the way, your body really wants, because your cells really want that. And at the essence, that's where it all starts. right? So if we
Mm-hmm.
can improve your cellular health, then we can begin this process of improving your general well-being and ultimate your health in total. So again, we were early in the market. We were very organic. I literally, I was in every position of the company. I was the first receptionist.
That's great.
I hired the first nurse, and I worked very closely with Dr. Bloom in terms of learning this type of medicine, because I had to really articulate to the community what it is we do and why we do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah,
So I'm sorry, so the first one in 2014, this is East Delray. And did you have a membership model, Ross, or was it just a la carte?
it was strictly just a la carte, because patients would come in and, sort of, I remember they would walk in and just be sort of blown away by the experience. I was very much big into the sensory, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the look, the smell, everything that would I don't want to say overwhelm a person that walked in our door, but it was enlightening. Like it's like, what is this?
Mm-hmm. That's
And
how I felt when I found you. I went into Midtown Miami, which happened later,
yeah,
and I saw this biostation and I thought, what the heck is that? And let me go in there. And it's like, wow, what is this place? It's beautiful and just really draws you in.
thank you. And that was what we wanted to do. Is we set out, the task at hand was to redefine healthcare, right? And that's ultimately what our mission was to do, is to redefine this and to make it, to your point, experiential. And when you walk in, it should be beautiful. You should be treated like a guest,
Mm-hmm.
right? You should be, you should be feeling like everyone's providing attention that you need as a patient. And that's again what we wanted to, that's what we did, we're able to accomplish.
Well, it's great that you started with a clean slate because, of course, that's not how it works in medicine, and for obvious reasons. But people, consumers, have become in the last 10, 15 years so much more aware of that consumer experience that's being provided to them. And they want it, of course, to be nice. And there was never an option when you went to the medical. It was what it was, and now when you find that there's a different way, consumers want that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And this is one thing that, I've learned, and my father would tell you, they didn't, when you go to medical school, they don't teach you how to operate a business.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's always that notorious saying that, doctors are traditionally bad business people. They're brilliant minded individuals. I've seen a lot of physicians, and I've been very fortunate to see physicians that have been both, right? Very
Mm-hmm.
successful as business operators, and very successful and bright-minded physicians. But my father, he was not one of those. He was a great doctor and knew that's where his talent really lies. So it was a great relationship for us to come together.
Right. How perfect that he can now go back to doing what he loves and you guys can worry about the business side.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you opened the first unit in 2014.
Mhm.
It continued to get attention. What was the next step to expanding?
So it's a great question, because I was ready to go. I was ready to take over the world. I wanted to move fast and quick.
Mm-hmm.
And my father and a couple of really close advisors of mine and friends and friends of the practice were saying, Ross, slow down, nail it, then scale it, right?
Right.
And so ultimately that's what we were doing. And we were really trying to figure out ways in which we wanted to grow the practice. So we also invested heavily in the people that we were essentially bringing on, part of our family here. And we also invested heavily in the process and building in systems. And so, it was very prudent at the time to just slow down
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that we could perfect this. And so the natural market for me to think about was Miami, just because of just sheer population. And
Mm-hmm.
um, that market was not, that market was more educated about the things that we do. And
Mm-hmm.
so ultimately, that's where we ended up next. So,
And there's a lot of international travel there as well.
yes. So very similar to like our first location, except much bigger. But we built out with 4 walls and built a biostation, which you walked into, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate at that time to also have been introduced to Dr. Julio Gallo. He's
Mm-hmm.
a plastic surgeon, and he and I have joined forces, or I should say, the biostation and Dr. Gallo have joined forces, and have been working together since we opened down there. So it was a great relationship. In the same year, I was actually introduced to actually the president of the Boca Resort at the time. His name is John Tolbert, and he became a friend of the practice and said, we would love to open up a biostation inside of a hospitality property, and
Oh,
that being the Boca Resort, which was definitely one of our jewel properties down in South Florida.
for sure.
And so that was just sort of like Keith and I looked at each other and said, this is not something we thought of, but this would be pretty unique. And nonetheless, if the biostation could sort of be in line with a brand like the Boca Resort, it would extend some credibility. And so, after we completed a small tenant improvement inside the facility, I said, Keith, this is really, we're onto something here.
Mm-hmm.
I said, there's 1,000 rooms, and they also had about 5,000 members. And in
That's a
terms,
nice bunch to be introduced to.
right, right. And so, once we were able to gain the right exposure and be connected to the membership base, that model took off. And so 2019 was a pretty stressful year for the business, just
Mm-hmm.
because we were now multi-unit operators, and it was
So at this point, you had 3 locations?
3 locations. So we opened up 2 in 2018, one in Q1 and one in Q4, which was the
Mm-hmm.
book.
Okay.
And basically we were again back in the beginning, right? A new sort of
Mm-hmm.
a new opportunity, yet new challenges. And then 2020 came, all the locations were stabilized. Everything looked like we were heading in a really strong direction. And then ultimately, March 27th, we shut down the operation, just like everybody else in the world, and sort of not knowing where we were going to go and which direction ahead.
Was there an option to stay open because you were medical?
Yes, we were deemed elective. But Dr. Bloom said, listen, this is not emergency medicine. And I wasn't about to put, my dad, and who at the time was probably, so he's probably 75 at the time, right? And I was unwilling to put him or any of the other staff in harm's way. And so we shut down operations. Everyone just went to their homes, right? And the practice pivoted, right? Because people then were more interested in the services we were offering, because everyone was trying to improve their health and well-being as quickly as they possibly could.
Well, we've talked about that many times on the podcast, how COVID, while being a terrible thing for the world, was a strange lift for the wellness industry, because clients said, oh, right, I should definitely get that massage and I should take care of myself. And now they want all the things we've been telling them they need to have for 15 years.
Very much so. Yeah. So we had this sort of like influx of inquiries, right? And it was like, okay, how do we service these people?
Mm-hmm.
And so virtual care became very popular. We pivoted the practice. And because our practices were primarily in South Florida, right, we started to open the doors a little bit sooner than most of the world. And we were very controlled about it. My partner Keith, it was hilarious. I lasted about a week at my house, and I said, why don't I go back to the office? Nobody's there. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get any work done being home. And so, and my father said the same thing. So why don't I just go back to the office? Because he was doing a lot of virtual consults. So basically my dad, Dr. Bloom was in an entire suite. I was basically in an entire suite. My partner Keith stayed at home for about 3 months, and I'm like, Keith, you have 2,000 square feet over here, just you. And our team really that like most people, unfortunately, we furloughed a lot of individuals because we had no idea what was going to happen. And that was a really that was probably one of the worst days that I can remember, is sending out letters to people on a Sunday. I mean, everyone kind of most of our staff that we work closely with, we always talk about culture, right? We always talk about these things, and we really felt like the culture of our practice was that of a family, and so that was just a really challenging day. But nobody knew what the future looked like.
Oh, you didn't know what the future held? Come on.
Right. And so, and then slowly but surely, we started adding back some of the core team, right? And as our practice continued to move, we just pivoted. And then we started opening up slowly, one day at a time, one patient at a time, right? And then that, and Dade County was different than Palm Beach County. So they were, because it was more densely populated down in our Miami location. We were basically there was 300 apartments on top of us, and in Midtown probably has 5,000 apartments within a 2-block radius, basically, right? So it was definitely a much slower relaunch in that market. But every property that I was trying to get in touch with during 2019, after we opened the Boca Resort, everyone was too busy. Now everybody had nothing but time.
Interesting. It's like, oh yeah, those biostation people, where are they?
Exactly. So I always say I traveled more in 2020 than I think I had my entire life. And I went from everywhere from the Virgin Islands all the way to Hawaii. And I made a lot of stops in between, looking at various properties that were closed down or slowly reopening.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was looking at, I fell in line with the spa world, right? Because people perceived us as a med spa. And then I quickly educated them that we're really more of a concierge medical wellness practice.
Mm-hmm.
But our process and the experience we want to provide to our guests, our patients, is very similar to that of a spa, right? And I always thought healthcare is so sterile and it's so not an enjoyable experience, but it's so important for people. And I was like, you go get a massage at a property, right? I mean, you get ushered everywhere,
Escorted.
escorted, right? And like beautiful, you get a locker room, you get slippers, you get all these things, and you get this great experience before your actual service, during your service, and then after your service. And I thought we need to match that up with a healthcare experience. So I became very close with spas really throughout the country. And Tammy and from the Carillon has been very critical in supporting our mission.
Tammy Pale is always on top of what's coming. She really can see the future.
Yes, she is one that can see the future. And so ultimately, I started to get introduced to properties, right? And so we continued to grow the practice throughout 2021. I think during that period, during 2021, we opened up 2 additional locations.
And where were these?
One was in Jupiter, Florida, and one happened to be in a West El Rey market. And so that was a unique relationship as well, because during that relationship, I'd say that location, I was introduced to a doctor, Dr. Mitchell Matez, who was performing pellets. He was local in our community, well respected, and he and I connected one day, and he said, I'd love to be part of your movement, and I'd love to join your team. In fact, I'd love to, whatever you did with Dr. Bloom, that's what I'd love for you to do for me. And I said, I'll do all the blocking and tackling, and you just practice medicine. I said, okay, that's something that we've perfected at this point in time, or continue to perfect or try. And so we took his practice and we put it inside of a location. And for lack of a better term, we biostationized the location and his practice, and it's taken off. And so that has been a unique, interesting
Amazing
way is to partner with doctors who already have existing patients and trusted patients. And
so the way forward, I mean, how many are there now, Ross? How many biostations today?
So at the end of 22, we ended with a total of 11.
Wow. So you did open up in Hawaii.
Yeah, we opened up at the Grand Wailea in Maui.
How did
Which,
that come about? I mean, that's a little far afield from Southern Florida.
yes, yes. So the Boca Raton was once a Blackstone-owned asset, and it was
Hmm.
a Waldorf Astoria managed property. And the Grand Wailea really is a sister property to the Boca Resort, which is
Hmm.
not its own. And so flew out there a couple of times, and very similar thought process. Listen, it's roughly 1,000 hotel rooms, and they've got memberships. They have a club component, or I should say, membership component, and we just had the opportunity and we took it. And then our director of clinical operations, Danny Shaper, who's been with us for years, and we would not have had the success we've had without her. She moved there and helped open up the practice. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so very thankful for her and taking that opportunity. But she loves a good challenge, and she's been very successful.
Well, it seems that you have a really broad route forward. I was at the We Work Well buyer conference last week in outside Georgia, and I heard the name biostation come up a few times among the spa and hospitality professionals that were there. One of them was Lifetime Fitness.
Interesting.
So, can you elaborate on what you might be doing there?
Um, well, we've opened a facility inside of Lifetime Fitness in the Boca Raton location, and more to come on that. We'll see.
Well, I thought that's genius, right? You've got a national chain of a highly regarded, health oriented people, membership base, so there are so many options for biostation going forward. If you meet someone in the elevator today, Ross, what's your elevator speech on what is biostation today?
It's a great question because it's not an easy one to answer.
No.
I always, it's really hard to sort of give the elevator pitch, but essentially I describe ourselves as more of a medical movement, really trying to bring medicine in the everyday life of a patient, right? In the spirit of trying to prevent age-related disease. And the outcomes are you're going to alleviate age-related issues. And so really it's I just say it's a movement that we're trying to catch up to and bringing and dragging the medical community there, because healthcare in my world is really critical for patients' well-being, right? And if healthcare is perceived as something only when in need and not when in want, then our healthcare system will be just what it is, which I would say sick care versus healthcare. And not to say that traditional medicine, there's obviously my father positively impacted people's lives before the biostation. And obviously, there's a huge need and demand for traditional healthcare. But if we can get in front of things, then I think we can impact people's lives in a much more influential and positive way.
So, Ross, tell us a little bit about what I might find when I enter a biostation. I'm sure they're not all identical, but is there a physician on staff? Are there nurses? Can I get a massage, a facial? What is the normal sort of roster of options for me as a consumer?
So you'd walk in, be greeted by what we call an office coordinator. Every location has either a registered nurse, a APRN, a physician assistant, an MD, DO. So it's very medically focused. It's very clinical, but it's very elegant, and you get this calming experience. We do not offer your traditional spa services such as massage or facials. We just don't do those things. It's really more about
We're okay with that.
yeah. It's really more about leaning towards all clinical medical services, but in a very inviting environment.
So there will be services around hormone replacement, obviously, and around beauty. Like, what sort of things can I get done?
Yeah, so you can get everything from neurotoxins, so injectables, and as well as fillers. We have laser treatments. We have body contouring machines. Um, You would also end up, you can explore the menu of IVs that we offer to patients.
Hmm.
So again, I always go back to high dose micronutrients that are
Hmm.
infused directly to the bloodstream and how that really impacts one's well-being. Um, we talk about gut restoration. We talk about cognitive improvements. We talk about your thyroid. We talk about inflammatory biomarkers that we try to identify and track and ultimately reduce. And yes, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is a big aspect of the practice because we've found that once we sort of optimize the biological processes,
Hmm.
that patients feel and look a lot better. And then they become part of the tribe, if you will, right? And
Well,
ultimately,
sure. I mean, you've converted them.
right.
But
And
what's ahead for me? If I'm a woman and I come in and I get a pellet inserted, does it run out? Do I need to replace it? What are the next steps for me?
so again, you'd be onboarded through your patient advocate who would be managing your process here in terms of your relationship with the practice. So you'd come in, we do, a pretty extensive initial workup. And again, you'd spend that time with one of our medical professionals developing a plan. If pellets were something that the provider thought you'd benefit from, then ultimately we'd do the procedure. Within 30 days, you'd come back for repeat blood work just to make sure that
Hmm.
ultimately we're hitting the targets, right? Because we want to get into optimal ranges and not just in normal value ranges, right? And so we start out pretty conservatively. We want to make sure that patients are, we start slow. And if we need to increase as we go, we do so. So that's part of that 30-day snapshot. If we
Hmm.
need to do an additional insert at that point in time, then we can. And then a typical patient will, if pellets, again, is the modality that's provided, every 3 to 6 months, a patient will come back in for an additional insert. All the while, you're communicating on a consistent basis with your patient advocate because you may be on other recommended supplements, other recommended peptides, other recommended medications,
Hmm.
all of which come from our compounding pharmacies. And so it's always ongoing managed wellness programming.
So the world is your oyster, right? Everyone needs age management in some aspect or another. Do you expect to franchise your model? Is that the plan, or you want to own your locations?
It's a great question. So we've gone in various directions on how to grow the business. Um, the way that
Not
we
that you
operate,
have to grow. I'm not a fan of that. We have to grow. We're not on Wall Street, but you probably, I know that your psyche was oriented to that.
yes. So we thought we were going to franchise, and then we sort of held tight on that thought process. Because we had not proven out we could do this in multiple units, so we didn't
Hmm.
feel that could with confidence convey the message to investors. And B, we wanted to really protect the brand and ultimately personalized healthcare sometimes can be a challenge if you move too fast and
Hmm.
you get too many operators. And I always go back to the two core values that Dr. Bloom really
Hmm.
brought to the table, which was medicine over money and patient over profit. Not to say that there aren't franchises out there that do a great job, just in the way in which I guess how we approach providing the care to our patients, it was challenging to replicate. Up until plus we are in process of developing our own technology that could potentially allow for that. To your point, there's a lot of inquiries and inbounds about how we grow our business and how we grow our practice. And the market has caught up to us. People want what we're offering, and
Hmm.
people like the way we deliver, both from an education experience and outcome perspective. So we just pretty much more than doubled our locations in 2022.
Mm, that's a
So
big jump.
it's a big jump. Yeah. So we're just sort of sitting tight for a period of time until everything gets organized again and our roots sort of get firmly secured, if you will. And then we'll figure out what the next step is for the biostation.
And Ross, a question on profitability. I mean, do you like to see each unit be independently profitable, or is it sort of part of a greater whole? I know you have a corporate office, how are you feeling about the direction financially?
Um, I, I'm feeling very at this present moment, I'm feeling really positive.
Good.
We just to have grown at such a rapid pace put a lot of stress on the business. We've invested heavily in the team here. We've onboarded, we continue to onboard great assets to our team. And so our team is growing a lot deeper, which is helping support systems and processes, and as well as, which ultimately funnels all the way down to the patient experience,
Mm-hmm.
which from our core team is the most important aspect of the practice.
And how many people work for biostation now?
We have 87 employees in total.
That's a big jump from what, 3 that you started with, including you, right?
Yeah. So it's been a great journey.
So my last question, Ross, I mean, I'm catching you off guard on this, but what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned in this whole last 10 years you've been on this journey?
That is a great question. Biggest lesson I've learned is you never know. Trying to think of really a good way to answer that question. Continue to be a student every day. Listen more than talk.
Mm-hmm.
Think before you speak.
That's a good one.
Right. And work with people and make sure they feel that instead of having them work for you. That's sort of one thing that I think that has allowed us to be really successful.
Well, that sounds like a great group of qualities. I'd want to work for a company like that too. And of course, now I want to head to my nearest biostation. I don't think there's one in Pennsylvania yet. So
Not yet.
I hope it's soon.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining us today, Ross Bloom. Really appreciate your time in this story, and we wish you the best of luck. Everyone, look for a biostation coming soon near you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.